Hello, and welcome back to another fanfiction reading. This is part 2 of my first reading, because I've never read this, of Shatter Me by TheNeopolitan, the second book of I Scream. So, yeah. We're going to read the remaining 3 parts, and we'll see if the story continues afterwards. It in theory could be the end, but I kind of doubt it. I don't know. We'll see. That's not the point right now. We need to read Will to Kill. My temporary team and I made it to the aircrafts with the other students. I found a rag and tried to get as much of the sticky pink sap off me as I could, but it had stained my white coat. I growled in frustration and annoyance as I wiped the last of the sap off my collarbone and then tossed the rag away. I could have looked that up too, said a voice from behind me. I didn't have to look to know that it was Loki. If you had tried that, Miss Shiver, you'd be dead, I spat, turning to face him. The arrogant jerk was leaning against the wall with his arms and legs crossed and a smirk on his face as his green cat eyes watched me closely. He chuckled at my reaction and replied calmly, "You're so cute when you try to act all vicious. If looks could kill, that boy would be dead and I wouldn't be standing here thinking about all the different ways I could kill him myself." All I wanted to do at this moment was to slap that stupid grin off his face. Jake shook his head from where he and Axel stood. I wasn't the only one who was getting sick of Loki's attitude. Jake sighed in frustration. "Just leave her alone." "Oh?" Loki's eyes flickered. Loki's eyes flickered to the other boy. "And why do you care? Is it possible that you have a crush on the little ice cream girl too? Huh, tough guy?" Jake was clearly growing more frustrated, but he was doing a good job of controlling it. Instead, he replied in a calm voice, "No, it's just annoying to listen to you try to flirt. It's clear that she's not interested. You should probably just give up." I smiled a bit, thankful that Jake had spoken up. I was starting to grow too frustrated to use words with the orange-haired boy, but I gained a new respect for Jake. Loki didn't seem put off by Jake's words at all. Instead, an amused light flashed in his eyes. "I don't give up that easily," he said with a grin. Before he could say anything more, Professor Goodwitch... I won't give up that easily, he said with a grin. Before he could say anything more, Professor Goodwitch called him away to help load jars of sap onto another bullhead. "I'm going to kill him," I scowled, mostly kidding. Jake chuckled and said, "Can I help?" "I'll help you hide the body," Axel offered with a tentative grin. Fuck's sake. I smiled at her, thankful that she was starting to speak up. Soon after, Loki returned, but thankfully the bullhead that we were on started up and it became too loud to hear him speak. It was around noon when we landed, and I saw Wolf waiting for me on the platform. The second the aircraft was on the ground. I leaped out and ran to him. "Hey, Neo, how'd it go?" he asked with a chuckle as he caught me and hugged. I simply groaned at his shoulder. "That good, huh?" he chuckled. "What happened? You smell like tree sap." "I'm gonna kill him," I grumbled. "Him? Who's him?" Fuck. Oh, God. Okay. "I'm gonna kill him," I grumbled. "Him? Who's him?" Wolf ear twitched curiously. "One of your temporary teammates?" I glanced over at the aircraft and saw Loki, Jake, and Axel making their way over to us. "I need a favor," I told Wolf quickly, glaring at Loki as I remembered one of the things that I had said to the orange-haired boy. "Sure, what do you need?" Wolf asked with a shrug. "Pretend to be my boyfriend." Now I turned pink, realizing what I had just asked of him. My request had caught him off guard. "Wait, what?" he asked, his eyes widening a bit in surprise. You don't have to," I said quickly, knowing how weird it was to ask of him. "Sure," he grinned back to his normal self, and an amused smirk rested on his face. He said, "Am I allowed to ask why?" "He's coming this way," I nodded in the direction of the approaching 3. "He wouldn't leave me alone, so I said I had a boyfriend. It was stupid of me, but I couldn't think of anything else." Wolf tensed a bit but calmed himself before asking in his usual upbeat tone, "Which one is it? Why didn't you just kick his butt? Leaving him alone isn't like the Neo I know. If he opens his mouth, which is very likely, you'll figure it out immediately." I couldn't beat him up because I'm still on a strict no fighting with other students probation, and Goodwitch would probably just love to give me detention or kick me out of Beacon entirely. I sighed. I took his hand as the 3 approached us. His hand was very familiar to mine. Holding hands was just something we did. In this instance, it just helped me sell the part. "Hey, sweet thing, who's this?" Loki asked in his amused tone. Sweet thing. I clutched Wolf's hand tighter in annoyance. Killing him was still an option. I shoved those thoughts away and put a smile on my face as I said, "Hey guys, this is Timber, my boyfriend." I had almost forgotten to tag on the last part. Honestly, it felt a little weird. I did like Wolf like that, but announcing that we were a couple when we weren't just felt off. Wolf is Axel, Jake, and Loki. "Hey," Wolf greeted cheerfully. He took Axel's hand. He shook Axel's tentatively outstretched hand, then he shook Jake's hand, and Jake offered him a nod. Then Wolf took Loki's hand and they stared each other down, a grin plastered onto both their faces. "So, you're Neo's lucky guy," Loki smirked, releasing Wolf's hand. "Yep," Wolf said with a small amount of strain in his voice. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders without breaking eye contact with Loki. "Well, I got places to be," Jake said casually, breaking the tension between my red-haired Wolf and Loki. "Neo, right after you left, Professor Goodwitch announced that we would meet with the same teams after lunch for another class. I guess I'll see you then." "The same teams?" I asked, doing my best to keep the reluctance out of my voice. "Yep," Axel nodded. "Okay, I'll see you in a bit," I nodded as I waved goodbye as Axel and Jake excused themselves and walked in separate directions. Axel met up with his girl that I had seen earlier this morning. He took each other's hands and walked away. I turned back to Loki with the last one standing with Wolf and I. He had a mischievous look in his eye like he was about to try something stupid. Maybe he was debating kissing my hand again. But with this crazy boy, how could I possibly know? Okay. He kept his hands to himself and winked at me, saying, until our next adventure, sweetheart." He shot one last look at Wolf before turning on his heel and walking off. "So that's the guy, huh? How did you put up with that all day?" Wolf laughed. "I have no idea," I breathed, relaxing a bit. Wolf removed his arm, but I couldn't help but feel a little colder without it. "Want to take the long way around? I just need a little break from people." "All right," Wolf nodded, and he took my hand and we began to walk around the school. There was something a bit off about him. I couldn't figure out what it was. There was a slight hesitation before he spoke. In his movements, his hand felt more tense, almost as if we didn't hold hands whenever we walked anywhere. "Hey," I said after a moment of walking in silence. What's wrong with you is what I wanted to ask. Was my odd request making him feel awkward? I didn't say that, and instead added, "Thanks for pretending to be my boyfriend today. You don't have to anymore. I'll figure out something else to tell Loki." At this point, Wolf stopped walking. He used his free hand to rub the back of his neck nervously. His eyes wandered the ground for words to say. "Neo," he said hesitantly. "What is it?" I asked, a bit of worry slipping into my voice. Did I upset him? Did I make him feel too weird? I tried searching his eyes for the answer, but he hadn't looked up yet. He finally brought his eyes up to mine. It was clear that something was on his mind and that he was just struggling to say whatever it was. "I don't want to pretend to be your boyfriend," he said nervously, watching my reaction closely. I'll admit I was a bit hurt, but I did my best not to show it. "That's fine," I forced myself to say. "You don't have to." "No, it's not just that," he said quickly, taking a step to close the distance between us. He glanced upward, as if whatever he was trying to say would be written in the sky. He bit his bottom lip and brought his eyes back down to mine. He took a nervous lip and finished in a rush. "I don't want to pretend, Neo. I really like you. I don't want to pretend to be your boyfriend. I want to actually be your boyfriend." He then watched my reaction with a bit of worry in his eyes. To be honest, this had caught me completely off guard. I had no clue what to say. I loved him. I loved him more than I had ever loved anything in my entire life. And I really wanted him to be my boyfriend too. But it was like my brain had disconnected from my mouth. The words couldn't come to me, and for a moment I just stood there with my mouth open slightly as my brain reeled, searching for anything to say back to him. My hesitation caused him doubt, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, to either take back his words or play it off as some joke. To stop him, I did something that even surprised me. I grabbed the collar of his red jacket and brought his lips down to mine, standing on my tiptoes so I could meet him halfway. For a brief moment, we both froze, surprised by my actions. Wolf was the first to recover. He wrapped his arms gently around my waist and kissed me deeper. Why are we doing this? Not today. I moved my hands from his jacket to the back of his neck, kissing him back until we had to pull apart to breathe. I love you too, I told him softly, finding my voice and regaining my breath. I stood flat-footed on the ground, looking up at him. He had a wide grin on his face. This time it was Wolf that was speechless. "Aw, man," came a familiar voice from behind me. Wolf and I looked to see Bolt and Raish standing a small distance away. Bolt had spoken. "I totally thought this wasn't going to happen for another week," he grumbled. He handed Raish some money, and she elbowed him lightly in the ribs. "Way to ruin their moment, hotshot," she scolded gently. It's a good one. Okay. We all laughed, and we went to the dining hall for lunch. I sat with my boyfriend and my usual teammates at my actual teammates at our usual table. Happy as I could be. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself scanning the room for my temporary team. Axel was with the same girl as before. The girl kissed Axel on the cheek, turning Axel's face a bright red, as another boy and girl chuckled and teased her good-naturedly. Jake was currently being dragged from his place next to Velvet Sky. What? Currently being dragged from his place next to Velvet Sky from the team Coffee. Fuck! By 3 other boys that I hadn't seen before. They're all laughing and teasing him lightheartedly. My guess is that they were his teammates. Velvet giggled with her hand over her mouth as the other boys joked around. I noticed that Loki was nowhere to be seen. I just hope he wasn't tormenting some other girl. Lunch was over way too soon, and I found myself walking over to the platform for Professor Port's class. I gave Will a quick kiss goodbye and made my way over to the large group, seeing Loki, Axel, and Jake not far away. As I made my way over to them, I heard the professor announce eagerly, "So, who wants to hunt some Grim?" Alright, so, the chapter, Survive. Called Survive. Oh god. This is gonna be a long story. Oh boy. Alright, Survive. Professor Port loaded all the students onto the airships and dropped off teams in different locations. Port droned on and on about the different locations, dropping off teams every few minutes. He challenged us to slay more Grim than the other teams could. He was rambling on about the dangers, but how we all were trained to handle ourselves, and I began to drone out the sound of his voice, losing interest in his words and watching the trees fly below us. That being said, who's up for a challenge? I barely heard the professor say, "Aha, volunteer. Very well then, Miss Neopolitan, get your team ready to jump." I blinked in surprise, trying to process what had been said. I glanced at my teammates to see Meshiver had raised his hand and volunteered our team. I glared at him as we prepared to jump. Are you sure that you want to drop him here? It's not really safe. They'll be lucky to survive 10 minutes down there, the pilot objected. Loki will be lucky if he survives 10 minutes with me, I thought bitterly as Professor Port assured the pilot that he knew what he was doing. We were given orders to jump, and each of us leaped from the plane. I used my umbrella to slow the momentum of my fall before using the curved handle to wrap around a tree and swing slowly down. I glanced up to see how my team would do. Axel was the first to catch my attention. She used her swords and twirled him quickly like a helicopter propellers. That's awesome. Until she drifted down beside me. Nice, I complimented. Thanks, she replied with a nod before looking up as well as Jake made his way down. He dug his broadsword deep into the trunk of a tree and used it to slow his fall. I nodded in approval and looked back up, hoping that Meshiver would screw up his landing. My eyes scanned the sky and the trees above, but there was no sign of him. Looking for me, sweet thing? His voice came suddenly from behind me, making me jump. I turned to face him with hate-filled words on my tongue. A loud crash distracted me from my anger. I turned back to Axel and Jake and the sound of the crash, seeing a pillar of smoke rising from the trees and a good distance away. What happened? I asked the two, hoping they had seen whatever it was. The plane, Axel said in disbelief. It just started falling. It crashed into the trees. We had to check for survivors, Jake said with determination in his voice. Are you crazy? Loki asked in surprise. Grim will be swarming around the devastation of that crash. We don't even know if anyone survived. We still have to check, Axel replied. But, Loki began to protest. That's our job, I told him firmly. Loki opened his mouth to protest, but closed it again. He took a deep breath before reluctantly saying, "Fine," and lead the way. Jake took the lead, heading for the crash. It wasn't long until we came across Grim. Jake signaled for us to be quiet, then signaled for each of us to attack. Luckily, we weren't coming across very large Grim. As a team that didn't have much experience together, we weren't very good at coordinated attacks, and we kept getting into each other's way. This was more Grim than I had seen my whole life, and while Loki didn't drop his stupid grin, at least he did at least quit the jokes and started killing things. Somehow he managed to keep moving forward. "We're almost there," Jake huffed, pulling his sword out of the fading chest of a Beowulf. More growls were heard from behind us. They were everywhere, and in greater numbers than any of us had ever seen. "We stuck fighting here forever if we face every Grim that we come across," Axel noted. "She's right," I agreed, slightly out of breath. We have to move quickly. The sooner we get in, the sooner we can get out," Loki said calmly, shuffling a set of playing cards in his hands. I hadn't seen him fight, though I had seen Grim fall dead around him, though the fact that he was casually messing around with some cards seriously ticked me off. "Let's go faster if you guys have the energy for it," Jake decided. We all nodded, agreeing that faster was better. Axel and Jake sheathed their weapons, and we started running through the trees. As we ran forward, we spotted more Beowulfs up ahead. "Only fight if you have to. Keep moving," Jake instructed as he ducked under the reach of one. Axel ducked under the reach of two, pulling out her swords and cut them both deep enough to kill before sheathing her swords, never slowing her pace. A rather large Ursa blocked my path. I jumped onto the edge of a tree and used it to propel myself high enough to flip over the bear like Grim. I touched the ground, rolled back to my feet, and kept running. Once I was a good distance away, I checked to be sure that it didn't fall. This distraction caused me to charge straight into someone else. We collided hard, and I fell to the ground. I groaned and pulled myself into a sitting position to see who I had run over. He was about a foot or so bigger than me and had black hair. His jet black cat ears were revealed, and the second I looked into his black eyes, I was roughly dragged into the past. Oh boy. It had been a few years since I had seen those eyes. It was a while after Nicholas Sleeps had taken me under his wing, and I was still so young. We had finished an execution mission, a man and a woman. Their faces weren't clear in my memory. I had reached a point where I had accepted killing my targets as much as I didn't like it. I had killed the man myself. He was part of a particularly nasty gang, and his wife was also named a target. I was leaving their bedroom while Sly took care of cleanup. See, I feel like if you were assassinating like a person that's part of a particularly nasty gang, as it says here, that wouldn't be someone that like. That wouldn't really be like a thing that people would hate you for. I mean, obviously, it's not the only thing that she did, but like, still, it still is like, well, I mean, you did some good things. Anyways, okay. Hold on. Making sure that nothing that was left I could trace back to us. I was walking down the hallway, one crying softly. I slowly opened the door to a bedroom, clearly a young boy's. I couldn't remember now what it had looked like, but inside was a white door leading to a closet. The crying was coming from inside it. When I pulled open the door, I found a small boy about 2 years younger than myself. He was hugging his knees. His black cat ears twitched and laid back. He sniffled and stared at me with those wide, terrified lilac eyes. I saw myself in those eyes, the night I had lost my own parents. "It's okay," I heard myself saying. "Everything will be okay." I knelt down and took his hand. I barely remember trying to justify letting the boy live in my head. The targets were his parents, and he was just a small boy. What could he know? My small frame and ice cream colors must have convinced him that I was harmless. He didn't even hesitate to cling to me. I scooped him up and carried him. I picked up a red and white baseball cap that I pulled over his eyes so he wouldn't catch a glimpse of his parents as I carried him out of the house before Sly could see. I couldn't carry him much further than the end of the yard. "You have to go on your own from here," I told him, setting him on the ground and saying that he needed to go to the police station. He had cried harder when I let him go, saying that he was afraid. I knelt down to his eye level, promising that it would be okay. Did you know that this is a magic hat? I had told him, adjusting the hat on his head. If you wear this, it will keep you safe. I have no clue what convinced him to believe me, but the glow in his eyes told him that he did. He surprised me by giving me a hug and thanking me before taking off down the street as fast as his little legs would carry him. I couldn't help but feel incredibly protective of the boy who I just met, and incredibly guilty for what I had just done. Haha. You just took him out. You're so tiny, but you were going so fast. You actually ran someone over. That was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. He wiped away a tear from his green eye. Not that funny, dude, I groaned. I rose to my feet and offered him a hand. He scooped up a red and white baseball cap from the ground where it had fallen and tucked it into his head to cover his ears. His eyes widened a bit when they landed on me and my outstretched hand. He took it hesitantly, and I pulled him to his feet. Thanks, do I know you? He asked, looking me over. No, I said, dropping his hand and avoiding his gaze. You guys coming? Axel said, jogging back to us. I had nothing to say, and Loki was still laughing too hard. What's the holdup? Jake asked as he came up behind Axel. A grin appeared on his face as he recognized the boy standing next to me. Hey, Ethan, what are you doing here? Jake asked eagerly. I saw the plane go down and I was heading to it, the boy beside me shrugged. But you ran into each other. How is that possible? If you're going in this... Whatever. You two know each other? Axel asked, looking to our temporary teammate. Yeah, Ethan and I are teammates, Jake replied. Small world, Loki sighed, looking over his laughing fit. Where's your temp team? Axel asked Ethan. We got separated in the jump. I'm guessing that they're on their way to the same place. Ethan replied, looking back to me. Either way, we should get going. This guy coming with us? Loki asked, shaking the cards out of his pocket and shuffling them. Axel shrugged and said, I don't see why not. Ethan turned to me and asked, do you mind? Unable to answer, I just shook my head no. I didn't mind if he came, as long as he didn't remember me. Guilt was currently crushing me like a rock. What was I supposed to tell him if he did remember? Last I checked, simply saying, hey, sorry I killed your parents wasn't good enough for anybody. Jake grinned at his teammate and the rest of us and said, alright, let's keep going. No! Alright, Grim Trails. Which I don't believe is the last chapter of the story, but whatever. That's all that's available to read. Okay. The group pushed forward. For a time we were faster with Ethan's help, but fighting was inevitable and we were growing tired. We're nearly there, Jake panted, breathing in I could smell smoke, probably fire from the crash. The sound of fighting just ahead of us caused us to pick up our speed. We broke into a small clearing and found more huntsmen had finished fighting off a large Beowulf pack. Despite holding themselves high and ready for another battle, they were panting heavily and were obviously exhausted. A few were on the ground severely wounded. RWBY, I called as my eyes came across a girl wearing a red hood leaning against the base of a tree. I ran over and crouched down beside her, examining her as she clutched her side. Are you okay? I asked anxiously. Me? Yeah, I'm fine. The silver girl lied to me. I glared at her until she amended her statement. It's just a scratch. I'm fine, really. I looked at her again. Her injuries didn't seem to be too severe. What happened? I asked her, offering her a hand and helping her to her feet. She hissed in pain and tightened her grip on her side, but was standing all right on her own, which was more than I could say for some of the others around us. I don't know. I heard a few people shouting about engine failure and when we started going down. My attempt team and I managed to make the jump before the crash. A lot of others weren't so lucky. I followed her gaze to the burning remains of the crashed aircraft. A few people were gathered around it to mourn. Oof. I was about to ask how many we had lost in the crash, but RWBY continued to speak. In the crash, all of the death and screaming and the fear, it drew grim like I had never seen. There were so many, so many. I looked around me, taking in the sadness of lost friends and the panic of not knowing what to do, and the raw fear of just about everyone around me. I caught a glimpse of Professor Port lying unconscious some distance away. The sight of a doe faunus trying to patch up his wounds told me that he was still alive, but clearly not away or capable of giving orders. The sight alone made a few people break into panic murmurs. What were we going to do? We need a leader, someone to give the group direction. Without it, this mass of untrained This massive untrained huntsman would panic even further, which would only draw more grim. Already our fighters were tired and injured from just surviving this long. I thought for a moment of all the grim that we had simply run past just trying to get this far. "Everyone calm down," a calm but firm voice commanded loudly. I turned my head to see Jake standing tall on a nearby stump. In a moment, everyone in the crowd had hushed and looked his way. And was looking his way. We have to remain calm and focused, just as we were trained to do. Here's how we proceed. I found myself impressed as he calmly instructed everyone to return to their temporary teams. After teams were reformed, they were paired with other teams and assigned a number of wounded to guard the transport. It was too dangerous to stay where we were, which Axel calmly pointed out as she stood just behind Jake. Someone brought forward a map, and Ethan found an emergency outpost that we could use to contact Beacon, though the trail there was dangerous. Axel also found a small nearby town on the map that was slightly further away. He instructed certain teams to head for the town, especially those with wounded, as the town had a doctor. He then assigned a few other teams to head for the outpost and try to contact Beacon. Soon the teams dispersed, leaving only our team at the crash site. "Hey, why don't we go with the other groups?" Loki sighed, kicking a down tree. "We have to make a quick loop around the crash. We weren't the only team with the idea of making it back here to help, and I don't want them walking into an ambush of Grim," Jake replied. I'm not in agreement, watching him closely. I agree with all of his decisions. They seem safest and were very sound logically. He could make an excellent leader one day. He is probably his team's leader, just being honest. Okay. Great. Just sign us up for the super dangerous What? Super dangerous part. No big deal, Loki scoffed with an eye roll. Your attitude isn't helping anything, Machiever. Axel spiked up as she picked up a piece of the crashed aircraft and leaned against a nearby tree. For once, he said nothing as Axel cared directions to the town into it in case any groups came after we had gone. Loki was shuffling his playing cards again. This time he seemed a bit nervous. I might have found some joy in his fear, if he didn't have such a legitimate reason for being afraid. We took a small circle around the area, only having to fight off a few Grim at first before we headed in the direction of the outpost. Loki ducked out of reach of yet another Grim rather than fighting it. I climbed up its back and rammed my small blade through its head. He grinned up at me and the beast toppled and fell. "Thanks, sweetheart." He winked, still shuffling those stupid cards. What kind of huntsman are you?" I puffed angrily, tired of watching him do nothing. "Are you a huntsman or not?" "Technically not. He grinned. "I'm still in training." I glared at him, muttering as I walked past him as we approached a thick crop of underbrush. "Oh my God," I heard Axel gasp from just ahead of me. I fought through the brush and into the clearing to catch up with her and froze my path. "What is it?" Jake asked as he and Loki made it into the clearing just behind us. Bodies of the two teams that we had sent before us were scattered about, slowly fading away into dust. "Check for survivors," he said gruffly, his voice thick with worry. I took a few steps forward but froze against my eyes fuck. I took a few steps forward, but froze against. What the fuck? I don't understand how to read this story. Fuck's sake. Oh, God. Okay. But froze again as my eyes came across a familiar face. "No," slipped out of my mouth without me realizing. I pushed myself forward and fell to my knees beside him. "Ethan!" There was a large cut on the side of his head and blood was pooling around it. My eyes looked over him and took me a second to realize that his body wasn't fading away. I set my head onto his chest and held my breath, exhaling only when I heard a faint heartbeat. "He's alive," I called out. The others came to my side, a mix of relief and sorrow on their faces. "He's the only one," Axel told me. His eyes widened, switching colors. My eyes widened, switching colors on their own as I looked around. The others were nearly completely dust and had drifted away. Ethan groaned softly, gaining our attention. His eyes fluttered a moment, then flew open in panic. "Run! We have to run!" he cried out before breathing in shakily and panicked breaths. "Before it comes back!" "Before what comes back?" Loki asked, before Ethan could reply. Then there was another, and another. What? Footsteps. Something very big was moving this way. It sent Ethan even further into a panic. "We have to go. We need to leave," he cried out on repeat, pulling at Jake and me. "Shiver, help me hold him," Jake instructed, realizing that Ethan was too weak to walk on his own. Loki moved to Ethan's other side. Jake looked to Axel and I and added, "Clear the way forward." Axel looked at me and I nodded before we rushed forward into the woods. It was up to us now to make to the outpost and a contact beacon. Woo! So apparently the last updated December 5th, which I see is sometimes wrong, or there's just some sort of like somehow miscommunication, but whatever. Okay, so that is the end of what we can read of this story. Yeah, I don't know if it'll be updated, but currently it is March 5th. So if updates come out after that date, but somehow before this video comes out, then you know why. Other than that, that's about it for today, as it seems.